You're listening to the Lover Notes podcast.
Not quite.
Oh, my bad. The Labor Notes podcast, our weekly show on rank and file news and organizing tactics, and candy hearts, and red roses, and big boxes of chocolate, and impractically large, gigantic teddy bears, and little handwritten notes that say, "Do you like me? / want to sign a union card? Check yes or no."
And most crucially, for hot takes on why every rom-com is actually about organizing.
I'm pod co-host Danielle Smith, an organizer at Labor Notes.
And I'm pod co-host Natasha Laney-Ullman, a staff writer at Labor Notes.
And I'm ready for some super romantic, dreamy film takes.
Oh, hey, Sindhu. We're joined by pod producer Sindhu Sundar, who makes these episodes possible by drafting the scripts and making sure we're keeping up with our goof quota.
Well, listeners should know all three of us drafted this very special episode. I'm always good for goofing off on a holiday show, so thank you for indulging. Natasha, what did you pick for our Lover Notes episode?
Well, I went with Mamma Mia because I keep accidentally picking good movies, and I figured it was time to correct that. So the first thing you should know is that this movie does not have a plot.
It is pretty much just a vehicle for Meryl Streep to break into song.
Exactly, but they're good songs. Who doesn't love ABBA? And besides, technically worse movies do exist.
I'm gonna come clean that I'm unironically fully with you. Like the way that nervous flyers sometimes pop a Xanax to chill out on flights. I'm not getting through a red eye without some Mamma Mia.
So real. So for folks who haven't seen it, the film features Sophie, a young woman just a few days out from her wedding day, on a beautiful and totally made-up Greek island. And she lets her bridesmaids in on a little secret. She's invited 3 random men to the wedding. She did a little snooping in her mom's diary, and she's pretty convinced one of them is the father, though she doesn't know which.
I love snooping.
Who doesn't? Which brings us to our first organizing lesson from the film. Don't complain, organize. In her Stewart's Corner piece in Labor Notes issue 484 by the same name, Ellen David Friedman argues that complaining isn't just the first step to organizing, it's often the graveyard.
Natasha, we've been over this. You can't add Halloween sound effects to every episode.
Come on, but this episode drops on Friday the 13th.
Oh, yeah.
Yay! Anyway, Sophie could have just as easily let off steam with her bridesmaids about how she wishes she knew who her dad was.
Yeah, complaining can feel like you're bringing things to the surface and having important conversations with your coworkers about shared frustrations.
Exactly. But if that's where it ends, we can perpetuate this feeling of powerlessness that keeps us from taking collective action. A much better move, Ellen writes, is to help people do a couple things. First, identify the balance of power between workers and the boss. Second, come together around a shared problem. Third, overcome fear and plan collective action to address the problem.
And fourth, go back to complaining.
No, silly. The last step is to help people reflect on how it went and lessons learned, and then do it all over again.
And then do a bit of complaining as a treat, right?
I mean, at that point, you've earned it.
Okay, so how does this all play out for Sophie?
Well, she stashes the 3 men away in a goat shed, as one does, but her mom, Meryl Streep, I mean Donna, does a little snooping herself and finds them.
Oh, cool. So it runs in the family.
Yeah, exactly. So she asks respectfully what the hell they're doing in her goat shed and tells them to leave. But remember when I warned you that plot is not this movie's strong suit? Well, Sophie catches them just before they can leave and, I don't know, hangs out on a boat with them, just kind of singing about memories of her mom.
This is always happening to me.
Yeah, me too. Oh, and Meryl Streep tells her friends that she actually doesn't know who the father is either. That's important for later. So anyway, at Sophie's bachelorette party, she pulls each potential dad aside one-on-one and requests information about why their relationship with her mom didn't work out.
Information requests can be a crucial tactic for changing the balance of power in your favor. As David Williams wrote in a Labor Notes Stewart's Corner in December 2003, when the boss is attacking the union, say through discipline for minor infractions, a carefully crafted information request, or 20, can pressure management to back off.
Yeah, much like Sophie, who is peppering these complete strangers for intimate details of their lives, you could first submit an information request And if the boss denies it, you can file a grievance over that denial because he's violating the duty to bargain, which opens the door for another information request, seeking information on why the first one was denied. These things stack up pretty quickly, Williams writes.
Which brings us to our last organizing lesson, Campaign Mountain. You've heard Danielle and I talk about it before on the pod. It's this idea that as you plan your campaign, you should think about it as a mountain with escalating actions. Otherwise, you run the risk of things just sort of petering off and not knowing what to do next. Like in the plot of Mamma Mia, where all three men decide they don't want to do a paternity test because they're all okay with being 1/3 of her dad, and Sophie decides to postpone her wedding, and everyone just kind of bursts into dance. So, Danielle, what did you pick?
Well, as usual, I picked a real spectacle of a movie, Emerald Fennell's 2026 Wuthering Heights. But since I can't see it until it premieres late the night before this episode airs, I had to read the book instead.
Danielle, I hope you aren't planning to add a bunch of negative sound effects here when we all know you love reading. Busted.
So, what did you learn reading Wuthering Heights?
Well, first and foremost, I realized that the love story that's being heavily marketed to you by corporate interests might actually be a harrowing tale of psychological torment, abuses of power, and class struggle, which reminds me of a lot of the workplaces I've heard about.
But you chose it as your rom-com pick.
So, Emily Bronte's mid-19th century Gothic novel follows Heathcliff, a mysterious, quiet, and reserved young boy who is adopted by Mr. Earnshaw, the master of Wuthering Heights, which is, of course, a manor on the moors of northern England. Mr. Earnshaw dotes on Heathcliff, who ends up becoming besties with Mr. Earnshaw's daughter, Cathy, and enemies with his son, Hindley, causing lots of passion and resentment. After Mr. Earnshaw dies, as most characters in the novel eventually do, Hindley abuses Heathcliff terribly and makes him work in the fields instead of learning with Cathy. And then when Cathy forms an attachment with the handsome but weak and spoiled Eggard Linton, who lives next door at Thrushcross Grange, Heathcliff feels ugly and inferior and runs away.
Bro, we've all been there before. So what did Heathcliff do next?
Well, I think he read the Steward's Corner from Ellen we just talked about because he never complained.
That's good.
Instead, he harbored a ton of resentment and dedicated his life to getting his revenge and destroying both families.
That's less good.
Yeah, so basically he returns one day with a bunch of money that no one knows where he got it, but everyone figures it's probably not from something good because he never talks about it or explains it.
I like to imagine he went to work at like the 1700s equivalent of McKinsey, laying people off at the early Yorkshire textile mills.
Yeah, so then he just kind of ruins everyone's lives. He gets Hindley to gamble Wuthering Heights away into his possession, and then causes the degradation of Hindley's son, Hareton, by tricking him into hating learning. He marries Eggard Linton's sister and torments her, and then forces Eggard and Cathy's daughter to marry his son, who is very sickly, and makes his son leave him everything in his will so that Heathcliff ends up owning Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange and all of the money and stuff. And also everyone is just like eating gruel the whole time.
Is the organizing lesson coming now?
Right. So, well, ultimately the revenge doesn't quite work. Sure, everyone is suffering the whole time and dying from vague fevers and consumption and childbirth, but at the end of the novel, Hareton, who Heathcliff tried so hard to degrade, and Eggard and Cathy's daughter, Catherine, I know that the name thing is confusing, who Heathcliff tried to terrorize, end up finding redemption and happiness through love for each other. And then Heathcliff gets really weird and insists on being put in the same coffin as the elder Cathy, like a sick freak, and dies and maybe becomes a ghost. That's all to say, Heathcliff should have read Barbara Maddaloni's Slingshot, Take the High Road, which he could have found on the Labor Notes website.
I love that one. In her Slingshot, Barbara talks about why it's important for union reformers not to get bogged down, or in Heathcliff's case, moored down, in a mudslinging fight with our opponents. The mudslinging often becomes a distraction from what people really care about or the issues they're facing. In the instance of Wuthering Heights, how those in control of the manors were able to more or less abuse at will the other people living there. As Barbara points out, when you start slinging mud, some of it usually ends up on you. And if you're in a 19th century Gothic novel, that mud might be landing on your grave after your untimely death from too much passion.
Exactly. The slingshot notes that it's important for reformers to have an alternative vision that they can share and build with other members. Heathcliff didn't have an alternative vision for Wuthering Heights. He just wanted to take it away from the people in power, and by the end of the novel, the house is boarded up and unused. It's not enough to just want to take positions away from bad leaders. We have to have a vision for what we want the Union to be, and how we'll do things differently. As Barbara put it in her slingshot, quote, "As reformers, we want to be crystal clear about the vision for the Union we are inviting members to be a part of. A Union that's democratic, transparent, and militant, and where members are connected to each other and leading the work," end quote. Heathcliff's approach to righting wrongs was definitely not democratic or transparent.
Yeah, Heathcliff really failed to do things differently. He just recreated and perpetuated the same kind of abuses he faced when he was younger. And all this did was make everyone miserable, including himself.
Well, the good news is that it doesn't appear that Emerald Fennell's adaptation is all too faithful to the novel, so we can hope that in addition to steamy romance, she added some good organizing principles as well. Okay, Sindhu, your turn. What did you bring for us today?
We can't do a Valentine's episode without one of my cherished flu and soup season classics, The Princess Bride. R.I.P. Rob Reiner, who directed this 1987 adapted screenplay. So we open with Grandpa pulling out the big guns when he has to sell The Princess Bride, by any measure a romance fantasy, to his coughing tween grandson who would rather keep playing his very pixelated but amazing for the time Commodore 64 baseball video game, 80s kids will know. Anyway, Grandpa calls The Princess Bride a story about, quote, fencing, fighting, torture, revenge, monsters, chases, escapes, miracles. If that's not a contract campaign, I don't know what is. But I know what I'd be telling my grandkid this story was about. How taking bottom-up action changes the balance of power.
Your grandkid is in for such a treat when they're laying sick in bed, losing all their crypto from betting on drone strikes on Polymarket.
All the more this child badly needs to hear the timeless message of love and collective action. One as it is told by both William Goldman, who wrote the novel that he also turned into the script, and Ellen David Friedman, a labor notes trainer whose Stewart's Corners on labornotes.org never fail to capture the transformative power of solidarity.
You don't really think of shop stewards as key figures in medieval capers involving cheeky swordsmen rescuing princesses from locked towers and foiling plots to incite war with the neighboring country. But I can see it.
Yeah, I really think Fezzik, the grounded and wise mercenary adventurer played by Andre the Giant, embodied some solid steward qualities. He's composed under pressure and is always thinking about getting people together to solve problems and to build courage and power. Fezzik did it all, from sobering up his despondent co-worker to get him back in spirits to avenge his dead father, to reviving our romantic hero from the brink of death after a night at Prince Humperdinck's torture chamber.
A scheming prince spreading propaganda and contriving trigger events to justify invading his neighbor? Where have we heard that lately? Also, this is just a boss at the end of the day.
True, and the way you rise up is with the people you act in solidarity with. And you do it by recognizing the things you have in common, like how you're all being affected by a boss pushing through a unilateral change on the shop floor, or a cowardly prince trying to rule by spectacle and force when he has lost the people's consent.
In her Stewart's Corner piece, Ellen outlines a scenario of a boss trying to change workers' schedules and the two ways the workers can respond. One is passive and deferential to union leaders who act as emissaries doomed to lose a procedural battle where the terms are dictated by the boss. The boss ignores the request to bargain, and any individual grievances build up and languish while the new schedule becomes established practice. In the ground-up approach, workers instead talk to each other and with their stewards across the shop floor to discuss how they're all being affected by the schedule change. That builds into general meetings, surveys, and engagement across the shop floor, and it creates a sense of possibility that workers can take charge and reverse the course being imposed by management. Also, we'll link to all the pieces we've talked about in this episode that are available online in the episode description.
Yeah, and that approach also really works for our protagonists. That is, the gentle giant Fezzik, along with Westley, our still convalescent hero who is floppy and disheveled from his dark period of captivity, and our ace fencer Inigo Montoya. It's how they outmaneuver Prince Humperdinck and his army of brutes at the gates of the castle during a climactic wedding scene. They talk to each other, get help from a neighbor in the miracle slinging business, and execute a successful plan involving a wheelbarrow and some practical effects.
I love the doing a theatrical scene with your friends part of the campaign mountain.
Yeah, no picket line is complete without some good strike props and chants. Last thing, for a movie called The Princess Bride, the titular character doesn't really get to be part of most of the action, but one thing I'll say for her arc is that her conditions vastly improve when she stops taking the prince's dubious assurances at face value and instead works with her band of comrades to devise their escape. It makes perfect sense that this rom-com basically ends with 4 friends riding off together across rolling hills.
That's our date. The latest episode of Tell Us a Movie, and we'll send you a Stewart's Corner article about it. Please rate us or leave us a review on Apple or Spotify, and if you're listening to us on Podbean at labornotespodcast.podbean.com, download our episode.
Coming up next, we have our February Stewards Workshop on Thinking Like an Organizer on Wednesday, February 18th, and a Running for Union Office training on Monday, February 23rd, both at 8 p.m. Eastern. Our next Secrets of a Successful Organizer series will also be in March and on Wednesdays, March 4th, 11th, and 18th. Our next session of What to Do When Your Union Breaks Your Heart will be on Tuesday, March 17th. You can sign up for these at labornotes.org/events.
The Labor Notes podcast is produced by Natasha Elena Ullman, Sindhu Sundar, and myself. Our title music was written and performed by our coworker Keith Brower Brown. See you next week. Solidarity, y'all.